interesting things about farming, at least one of the topics that I seem to get a lot of traction on in this channel has been any discussion of finances and the financial ramifications of what we're doing as a small farm. And so I'm assuming if you're anything like me, you probably have spent some time experimenting with and trying to cut down on the costs, the inputs that it takes to raise your animals, in my case, pigs. And the principal cost that I have in raising my pigs is really the food. Costs a lot of money. They're going through a couple of tons a month. I posted a short recently, which I can link later in the description or comments of this live stream. And you can see a little video that I put together about how I'm buying food and trying to save money in buying food. I'm Steven, this is Rowan Ridge Farm, and I want to have a little live stream to kick around some ideas about the idea of feeding your pigs for free. And I've seen a lot of videos around YouTube in this space, kind of dangling this idea of being able to feed your pigs at very low, minimal costs. And I want to start off right up front by saying that there is no magical solution, and the idea of feeding your pigs for free, it is a fallacy. It's a fabrication. It does not exist. Now, before you get all upset and click away, I'd like to point out that there are ways to feed your pigs for more or less money. And one of the most important things that I have been learning as I have been farming, and I really learned this when I was butchering, is that time is money. And a lot of times, what you might be gaining in going after low cost in terms of food sources that you're not having to put dollars towards, you're losing a lot of time. And there may be other avenues to explore or to gain income that you're missing out on because of the fact that, you know, you're just trying to save dollars instead of actually do what is going to be the most financially productive thing for you. Hey, Trisha and Nadir, how are you guys? Good to see you guys in the chat. Where are you guys from, and why are you interested in feeding your pigs for free? I'd be interested to hear from you guys, anybody that comes in. Drop comments if you're watching this after, or if you're in the chat. Love to hear where folks are coming from and what your purpose is. So my point is not to blackpill everybody and say that it's terrible and impossible to feed your pigs for free. I would like you guys to subscribe to this channel if you have any interest in farming and homesteading and being self-sufficient and sustainable agriculture and kind of taking back the the costs are significant when you're raising animals, when you're raising pigs, and it's a balance between time and money. And so there are avenues that can be pursued when you're farming, and I've explored a lot of them, which is the reason why I want to kick this idea around. I'm going to probably do a actual produced video about feeding and costs of feeding, and so I'm kind of using this as a laboratory to kind of kick this idea around, get questions, comments, and test some of this stuff out before I put something together finally. I'm a little bit behind on my editing, and I have a few videos that still need to come out before I'm ready to sit down and record again. But the idea is that you have to kind of figure out what your priority is. If you have all the time in the world and you're limited in dollars, then pursuing free food for your animals and forage can be a worthwhile endeavor because you have the time. If you don't have a ton of time, then you have to capitalize by using money instead of the time. Because one of the things that I noticed that would happen, pretty much all of the free food sources that I'm going to just kind of touch on here, those free food sources always involve a certain, almost always involve a certain element of time that you have to put in order to make those things viable. So I'll give you a couple examples. One of the things that I have done was donuts from Dunkin' Donuts. And this is something that can be done in restaurants. I also work at a hospital, so there was a time when I used to bring empty buckets, drop them off at the kitchen. The kitchen would food prep. They would put their stuff in these buckets, end of the shift, I would go home, take the buckets, and I'd dump them to my pigs. Dunkin' Donuts would have their donuts at the end of the day when they would be closing down. They would take the leftover donuts because they're not keeping them overnight to sell the next day. They would bag them. I made friends with some of the folks that worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and they would put all the donuts that were left over in one bag instead of kind of spreading them out to make it convenient because they couldn't technically give me the donuts. So we had to have an understanding that there would be a bag of donuts at the top of the dumpster that would be left unattended after they would close. And so I would come by after they closed and I would look for the heavy trash bag filled with the donuts. And I'd have to fight the raccoons because there were coons that would always get in there and try to help themselves to the donuts. And they were fat and happy and used to eating really well. So I had to get there on time. Otherwise, they would tear everything apart before I could. And another thing that I used to do, in addition to the food waste from the hospital and the leftover donuts from Dunkin' Donuts near me, I would also get spent grain, like brewer's grain. So when you're brewing beer, they use barley, and I'm not a brewer, so I couldn't tell you. There may be other grains involved, but predominantly barley, I believe, is the main one. And they would, after the beer is made, they get rid of all the liquid, and then the leftover grains, they got to get rid of those. And so rather than having a huge amount of grain every week that they have to throw away, they would put it in trash barrels, and then I would be able to come and pick that up and then bring that to my pigs and feed them. Now, each one of these things, and there are more ideas that we can kind of kick around for free food sources that you can use for your pigs. But each one of these things that I've mentioned, the food waste from the restaurant, leftover donuts from a restaurant, and the brewer's grain, these all involve a significant commitment of time in order to secure them. So the brewery was about 40 minutes away from me. So there's 80 minutes once a week going back and forth, plus gas, wear and tear, and then time loading and unloading. Not to mention the fact that when you have brewer's grain, you have to store it in such a way that it does not get moldy and it does not become unusable because it spoils if it's left out in the sun, especially this time of year. It can get nasty relatively quickly. When it comes to the food stuff, again, like Dunkin' Donuts, was there's some driving involved there, and then you have to go at the right time because you can't go when they're still open. You have to wait till they're closed and they get everything wrapped up and then pick it up from there. And if you go too early, then you're sitting around waiting for them to get everything put together for you. If you go too late, then the raccoons beat you to the donuts and you're not able to do much there because then everything is all distributed through the dumpster. So just a couple of examples there. There's also other food sources that, a lot of times people who grow vegetables locally or work in local food pantries, food banks, they will contact me and say, "Hey, I know you got pigs. We have some bread that's expired." Now, this sounds like a great deal because carbs, whether you're feeding them corn, wheat, rice, what have you, pigs are going to eat that. They're going to put on weight, right? Sounds good. Well, when they're throwing out expired bread, what comes with expired bread? Maybe 80, 85% of the time, mold. What happens when you feed pigs food products that have spoilage, mold, bacteria associated? Well, they wind up getting infections. And I've had a couple of my pigs get relatively severe cases of mycoplasma where they get an infection, that mycoplasma infection and it travels to their joints. And my breeding boar, a really fantastic animal. I thought I was going to lose him. Was it last summer or the summer before? He wasn't able to walk around. He was like laid up for almost a month where he could barely move. There was a while where he wasn't even able to eat. And I traced it back to feeding him some spoiled vegetables that had some mold on them. So when somebody gives you free food that you can feed to your pigs, it sounds really good because, hey, I don't have to feed the grain, right? I have this free food source. The problem is you have to go through it and make sure that it is fit to eat and that there's no mold in it and that it's actually good. And when you factor in the trash that comes with this free food, and you factor in the time that you're spending to prepare it and inspect it, and the mess, it's a monkey business. And every time I was doing this, I would say yes because somebody would come to me and say, "Hey, we got something for you. We want to help you out." And at the end of the day, I believe, people mean well. They don't like the idea of wasting food. But the reality, every time I would wind up taking these food items, I would invest a whole lot more time and irritation in cleaning all this stuff up and inspecting it. And I would be saying to myself, I would rather work an extra couple hours at the hospital and take that cash and just buy feed and be done with it and not have to goof around with this stuff. And it wound up becoming somewhat of an irritant trying to capitalize on free food sources. The biggest factor, I think, with making free food sources work for you is that it's got to work for you. In other words, if your primary goal is finding free food sources, then you're going to spend a lot of time in order to capitalize on those things. I started feeding whey to my pigs over the winter, and I'm probably going to do that again at some point. There's a farm that makes cheese, and you can get the whey for leftover from when they're making cheese. Then they're located kind of on the way home from work, so it's a little out of my way, and it's a little bit of a hassle stopping to pump everything, bringing the big tote container around with me. But it was interesting because I've always wanted to try feeding whey and dairy products. The problem is, again, that you have to factor in the time that is involved. And a lot of times, when you factor the time into your labor and the costs of what you're doing, the math doesn't really math when you do it that way. And a lot of times in farming, we don't factor in what our time is worth. We just factor in the fact, hey, I didn't have to spend dollars. I didn't have to hand somebody a wad of cash to get this whey, to get these donuts, to get this bucket of food scraps, to get this brewer's grain. So therefore it's free, and you're not counting everything that you have to put in and what your time and your irritation and sanity are worth in that process. So you have to find a food source that is going to be close to you and that works. Now, if I had a farm that was right down the road from me that had milk, that had whey, a brewery that was right in town near me where I could just go there and get this stuff quickly, it would be a very different situation. But that is not something that is going to be applicable to just anybody. It's not as simple as find a brewery somewhere. It has to be something that is local enough to you, where it works well enough to where you're not only saving money, but you're also saving time. Because if you're saving money at the expense of time, you're not actually saving money. You're just kind of trading, one hand washes the other. You're trading one problem for another. And money is a lot easier to get back than time. And that's something that I have been learning that lesson repeatedly because I'm really cheap. And so I'm always trying to save money, which is why I started doing my own butchering. And I like the butchering until I realized that I'm just spending a ton of time to save a little bit of money. I'd rather hire a butcher who's faster and capable, spend a little bit of money to get that butchering done, get my animals processed, and be able to get back to doing work that is actually going to make me money. One of the things also that I think is worth bringing up in the topic of free food sources for animals, specifically for pigs, the idea of feeding your animals for free kind of relies on this idea that there's a magical food source that I can just feed this one thing to my animals and they're just going to eat that and they're going to be great and it's going to be no problem. The reality is that pigs need to have a relatively diverse diet. I would say that in terms of supplementation, there's a lot that could be said about forage and things that you can grow on your property, like cover crops. Rob from Dowdle Family Farms makes amazing videos about that. Ironically, ChatGPT, as much as I hate to admit this, ChatGPT can give some pretty good advice about planting and timing and mixtures of cover crops that may be somewhat useful. This is like my second-ish year starting to dabble with the forages. And so I would not consider myself a reliable authority on, cover crops and forages, but that's something to consider. But even with that, what I've watched of Rob's videos, he always talks about diversity within the species or the types of plants that you're growing at any given time, where you're not just putting one seed out there, you're putting a handful of different seeds and they're working together. And that gives a nutritional diversity. And there's also biodiversity and all kinds of other benefits by having that diversity in the field from a from a soil health standpoint. But in terms of what the pigs need, it's more than just one magical plant. There's a handful of things that they need to balance out or round out the different components and nutrients in their diet, the amino acids that they need to have to make muscle grow, the lysine obviously being one of those things. But lysine isn't the only thing that pigs need. And so if you're getting free supplements for the grain that you're buying and selling, like for example, um, no, my mind just blanked. That's what happens when you get old. I shaved a lot of my grays out of my beard, but I'm getting old and senile here. The brewer's grain that I'm getting for free from that brewery, right? I can supplement maybe 10% of the pig's diet, and it does have some good protein, but it has no lysine in it. It doesn't have a lot of the other nutrients in it, so it acts as a filler. It does have some raw protein, but unless you get the amino acids needed to convert that raw protein into usable protein that's actually going to build muscle, it's not really doing anything for you and you're just kind of wasting your time. So any of those free food sources, they need to be diverse enough to actually work so that you're not going to mess up your pig, create health problems, or just create problems in their meat, in the meat quality, in the body composition, where you're getting too much fat or the wrong kind of fat. Here's a little story. I have some friends and lovely people. They raise pigs from time to time. They're dairy farmers. And so they love the fact that, well, hell, I can just feed my pigs for free because I just dump milk to the pigs. Now, when I was butchering these folks' pigs, and the fat was, number one, substantial. And it was a particularly, like, the consistency of the fat was very greasy and what I would call it wasn't my cup of tea. Let me put it that way. It's not a bad thing, and if you're making pigs like that and you're feeding them that way and you don't mind it, that's fine. But generally speaking, one of the big benefits of feeding milk to pigs is that milk does have lysine in it. And so that's a really important amino acid that you can't get in a lot of grains and plants. So the lysine is always the thing that we tend to focus on when feeding pigs. But the feeding them just a straight diet of milk made them really fat, and, like, you could tell without even looking to see whose name tag that was on the carcass, you could tell the ones that were fed straight milk because they had a lot of fat and it was greasy. It was super greasy, you couldn't get it off your hands. I mean, you had to scrub and it was a mess. And one of the best parts of pigs and pork, and I mean, I would say for beef as well, is the fat. And so if you're just loading up on a free food source because it's free, and then you find out after you send that animal to the butcher that, oops, loaded it up on free milk and I saved 50 bucks. However, now my fat on my animals is of a subpar consistency and it has degraded and degenerated my meat quality. Was that $50 that you saved on free milk, was that worth it in terms of the bigger picture of what it is that you're trying to do? Just some cautionary things to throw out there. And the same thing goes for any other food source, like if you're feeding your animals bread. Friend of mine, uh, Andrew, who may be subscribed to this channel. Andrew, if you see this, shoot me a comment and just say, hey, it'd be fun to hear from you. My best friend growing up, his dad raised pigs. They had a couple of pigs, and it was going to be a great big old time because they had a neighbor who drove a delivery truck, and anytime there was stuff left over or they got things that they couldn't deliver or unload, like any kind of spoiled stuff or any junk, they would always, give it to their neighbors, and Andrew and his family, they would feed it to the pigs. And he told me that uh, he told me that the pigs, once they actually butchered them, they tasted like awful because they fed them so much junk. and they fed them junk because it was free. Mia Slays says, "Hi, Dad. Hi, Mia. We should probably have a conversation about that if I'm your dad, maybe offline at some point. I don't know if the chat section of my YouTube video is going to be a good place to discuss, um, make acquaintances with unknown children. We should probably get to the bottom. Oh, May May. Hi, May May. Why are you on? You're 3 years old. How are you typing on here? This is a little odd. Hi, May May. Well, my 3-year-old has tuned into my chat. Hello, Amelia. I love you, sweetheart. That's better than discovering that I had an unknown child who discovered me randomly on YouTube somehow. So this is a good turn for the day's events. But anyways, all that to say that when you're feeding free items to pigs, the reason that they're free is probably because maybe they're not fit for human consumption, and so they're good enough and the pigs will eat them, which doesn't say much because like pigs will, eat dead carcasses. They're not selective eaters in a lot of ways. And when you're feeding them spoiled produce or junk or moldy bread or rotten spoiled milk or fruit or what have you, that is going to affect the quality of the meat. And again, saving $50 because you're not having to buy quite as much grain in order to come away with a, lesser quality of meat. That's something that I think you may want to think about. And in a perfect scenario, if you can spread out a handful of low cost or free food sources, get them in a way that doesn't kill your time input, and feed them in a small enough proportion. Eggs is another one that I should probably mention because a lot of folks have chickens and pigs. I tried raising pigs and chickens together, and the chickens just like it's impossible. I shouldn't say it's impossible. My goal was to, do like Joel Salatin, run the chickens with the pigs, and the pigs go here and they, shit, and then the chickens come behind and they peck the corn out of the crap and eat the bugs, so there's not as much flies, not as many parasites, right? This great harmonious balance of nature. And then the reality is that you can't keep chickens contained with the same fence that you use for pigs because chickens don't care about the electric. And, when you're using like field fencing, the chickens go through, around, above, underneath, they get through the fencing. And then I have my animals running all over my neighbor's yard. And then I'm getting, angry phone calls from irritated neighbors. So the whole running chickens concurrently with the pigs thing, that didn't really work out for me at this point. I tried chickens again actually this spring, and I think we got like a Fisher cat or some sort of weasel type of thing, got into the pullets when they were, maybe 12 weeks old or so, and just cleaned them out. So we're back to square one with the chickens again, and the pigs remain. They've kind of maintain their position as king of the hill in terms of survivability. But if you have eggs available that, you're just raising chickens and you only need, maybe a dozen a week to feed your family, and the chickens are laying 3 or 4 dozen, yeah, you can put those eggs into the feed. And eggs have lysine, and they're again not free because it costs something to feed the chickens. Although you can feed chickens all the trash that you would never feed to the pigs, because presumably if they're laying hens, you're not going to be eating them, at least not as a first line cuisine, right? So you can feed them all the trash. They'll turn that into eggs. The eggs can go to the pigs, and then the pigs will make good tasting meat out of eggs that came from trash fed chickens. There you go. See, you had to wait for 23 minutes and 44 seconds to get to it, but I just found the hack to make free food for your pigs a reality. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and like this video. Tell everybody you know that this is where all the secrets of small farming, homesteading are being illuminated for your benefit right here on the Rowan Ridge Farm channel. But just to wrap up, though, in all seriousness, I kind of kid about that. There is, for all the different things that you're feeding the animals, you want to have a little of one, a little of the other, a little of the other, and you want to layer them in as supplements. Generally speaking, the base level of nutrition that your animals need to survive, to function, and to grow, that needs to come from a consistent source that you can rely on, that is guaranteed, that is analyzable, that has nutritional information that you can assess and say, I have X, Y, and Z nutritional components that are being accounted for, and I know that the basic needs are being covered. And then additional supplementation for animals that you want to grow more, i.e. the ones that are going to the freezer, not your breeders, because you don't want your breeders growing too fast. You don't want them getting too fat, because then you're losing lifespan on those animals, and then you're kind of go in the opposite direction of what you want to do. You want to keep them smaller longer. But you can use that as supplementation, and that works great. But using as a standalone food source, in my mind, is going to be difficult to do for most people in most cases. But if you look around in a relatively tight perimeter and assess businesses that may have any type of food waste that you can use, that's your best bet. And then beyond that, limit yourself so you're not going too crazy trying to find a way to feed your animals for free, because 99 times out of 100, maybe 999 times out of 1,000, practically speaking, like there's not a lot of people who are going to be able to feed their animals without having to buy grain. That's just not going to be a reality. But you can supplement, and when you're able to supplement effectively, that helps the animals fill out quicker, go to market at a heavier weight, so it's going to bring you back more money, help them get market weight faster, which is again going to get them off your feed bill sooner. And so effective supplementation is where the conversation, I think, needs to go. How you can effectively supplement the diet that your pigs are eating in order to help them grow quicker, grow more effectively, build muscle, and then go to wherever they're going, so that you're not paying for their meal ticket indefinitely. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to hang out, have this live stream with me. I realize that, like, probably 2/3 of the people that have been on this live stream this afternoon, for whatever reason, are my family. And well, it's nice chatting with you guys. I am going to end the live stream here in the next minute or two once I kind of finish landing the plane. I do plan to make a video about this. So if you have questions, comments, thoughts, things that I'm missing or not getting right, I would love to hear about it in the comments so that I can kind of incorporate some of that. And when I actually shoot and edit a video about this, we can cover the bases and make sure it's thorough and that we're not missing anything. My goal is to help you guys figure out how to raise animals without breaking the bank, and doing it in the simplest, least interventive way possible, the old-fashioned way, for lack of a better term. And I ultimately want to help us make America farmers again, so that we can get more people involved in communities, feeding ourselves, rather than relying on big industry and industrial agriculture for the food that we have to put on our tables. And that's the goal, that's the vision. So I appreciate you guys tuning in, checking this out. I will see you guys in the near future. I'm going to be editing this weekend, hopefully get a couple more videos out and on the channel. I have been doing a lot of lives and a lot of shorts, because time right now, per my one of my main points on this live stream, talking about free pig food, time is really hard to come by, and time is of the essence. So I don't have a lot of free time between trying to do work with pigs, spend time with the family, having to go to work to pay the bills, etc. Time to edit videos is tough to come by, but we're going to keep stuff coming out here, trickling out the best we can, and get stuff done when we have the time. My schedule is actually, in terms of my work schedule, is moving towards a point of improvement where I'm going to have a little bit more time to work with. And so I'm hoping that I'm going to get back to a more consistent routine of posting videos, as well as doing the, couple of live streams here and there a week on the channel. So if you guys have any questions, comments, thoughts, drop that now. Otherwise, forever hold yourself. And I will see you guys in the next stream. Thank you.